Good evening. Thank you for being here. It's another round of Pub Theology online. We've been doing Pub Theology now for many weeks here online. We're usually at the Friendly Spot Ice House, where we have great conversations about faith, our community, and creating the common good. And my co-host tonight is Emilie Eaton from the San Antonio Express News. How are you, Emilie?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. So our listeners, we had some difficulty getting online at the start. And so thank you for the patience, not only of our upcoming guests, but also each of you probably wondering where the feed was. But this new technology we're all getting used to and learning about. So thank you. If you want to watch any of our past Pub Theology videos with other community leaders, you can go to our Facebook page, Pub Theology San Antonio, and see all of our past online events where Emilie, just a few months ago with us, interviewed Sheriff Zalazar a while back and was my co-host. But now we have two great leaders with us today. We'll bring both of them up. Emilie will introduce them, and then we'll have a one-on-one conversation with each of them respectfully. So Emilie, please introduce our next guest.
Yes. So we have two guests with us tonight. We're going to be talking about the police budget and police priorities when it comes to City Council. We have District 2 Councilwoman Jada Andrews-Sullivan, who has been a major advocate for criminal justice reform. And just last month, she pushed for change in how the police department handles no-knock warrants and chokeholds during arrests. So that's something we can sort of delve into later. But we also have District 1 Councilman Roberto Treviño, who another big advocate for criminal justice reform, who pushed for City Council to take down the Confederate statutes, which was a big move as well. And so we'll be delving into a whole bunch of issues. I guess, do you want me to ask the first question, Gavin?
Sure.
Or do you
I want to say hello. Welcome to another round of Pub. Roberto's been here before. Councilwoman, thank you for being here for the first time. It's always good to see you.
Well, thank you so much, Gavin. Thank you so much, Kim, for having us. This is awesome.
Hey, and I'm repping your shirt, Councilwoman. I'm on the Martin Luther King committee that Jada appointed me to, and so this is their shirt for last year. So I'm repping that for this year as well. So it's been an honor to get to know both of you in your time of service. I've known Roberto for many years now, for almost the entirety of his career on council, and he represents not only the district I live in, but where my church is, Travis Park Church. So thank you for being here, and we'll take it away and have a great conversation. We're going to bring Roberto back in a few minutes, and we're going to start our conversation with the Councilwoman.
So, Councilwoman, I'm curious if you could just sort of start by telling us a little bit about what your thinking has been the last couple months after the killing of George Floyd, what your priorities were, and when it came to the police budget, how you sort of delved into that.
So my emotions have truly been all over the place, especially as a mother of two Black young men and then two Black young women. And then just looking at our city and how our city has stepped up to truly make a difference. So when you look at the priorities as we went into this budget season, it's truly how do we give back to a community that feels that they haven't been heard, and how do you make that work across the board? But then we have to look at the systemic changes that we were able to make as well. So pushing forward with the CCRs for the no-knock warrants and the LVNRs to be abolished from police training and police. So pushing forward with the CCRs that we really wanted to do.
That's great. So can you tell me a little bit about your thinking when it came to the budget? Let's start, I guess, by saying, what does defund police mean to you?
So defund the police means that we're not taking away the safety of our community. We're not asking for the police to not do the job that they took an oath to do. But it really means how can we restructure some of the funding that is in the police budget to go towards more of those community resources such as housing and such as food insecurity. And then, of course, for our youth and our seniors, and towards mental health. And then how do we speak to a community that feels like those things have been on the back burner instead of upfront as a priority to truly speak to the core of the situation of why we have this issue of police reform on the table.
That's great. So, can you tell me a little bit about sort of your thinking on the police budget? I remember during one of the first sessions after the budget was released, you had a list of questions and you sort of went through line by line by line, asking what some of these different expenditures were that the police department spent money on. Can you talk a little bit about how you've approached this budget session, how you've gone through the budget, and what you think the priorities should be for City Council?
So this is the first actual budget that we've been able to sit through as new city council, to look at it line by line. Last year when we came into office, it was already done, and so it was more of just understanding what had been allocated and why it had been allocated the way that it had. But this year we were able to look at it line for line. And when you look at the police budget, it gave me great pause. When we first saw that budget number come out. And then it was the question of why did we have such a line last year when we get the budget. And so when we looked at it and know that it's under the CBA, which is a contractual obligation that we have as a city, the next question becomes, what do we have within the budget that we can start to reallocate back into our community? And thankfully, we have a city manager that was willing and to step up to the challenge to say, let's look at that. And then let's look at how do we reprioritize policing and how do we put the community first and what they're asking for. So now you're starting to see the conversation of mental health going over to the Metro Health Department. You're starting to see the issue of SA Stand and how that's now going to expand from just the east side to the west side. And those are some of the things that we can do within the budget. But then there's still some spaces that we have an opportunity to truly make great strides in. And that conversation is going to be continuous. Even though the budget right now is balanced, and yes, we can push forward to adopt it tomorrow, there's still the conversation that we have to have about putting true resources back into the community. And so that's what we as a council as a whole are looking at. And we're thankful that we have a city staff that understands that as well.
Now, when the budget came out initially, the proposal, what did you think about it? Did you feel like it struck an adequate balance between investing in community resources, like you were talking about, and the police department, or did you feel like the budget could have shifted even more towards investing in some of those social services and community resources?
When it first came out, it seemed a little disproportionate. It seemed as it was one weight heavier than the other. And so we started asking those questions because we know what the community was advocating for. We know what the community is crying for, and what they're looking for us as city leaders and city officials to really step up and do. So that's what really stuck out to me. And then going through the budget process and through our work sessions on how do we truly get to speaking to the community resources? How do we truly get to understanding what the community is asking for and then making the strides to get there without tackling more than what we have available, but then without taking away the public safety side as well. Because we know that our community right now is seeing how do we truly need our police? And we're seeing so many different scenarios play out in this short time. Understanding what now we're continuously having that conversation of what does it look like for policing and what do we need to reallocate and where do we need to shift the priorities and what is true policing for a community that's asking for more resources to keep them in houses and keep them with food and to keep their lights on and to keep the water on and to really speak to those social needs that we have to address.
Now, I'm not sure, Gavin, if this would be a good time to bring the councilman back in, but I'm sort of curious. Today there was a big meeting, and the city was going to unveil some of their changes that they adopted to sort of adjust to the community input that has been coming in. And I'm wondering if maybe you and the councilman, or maybe just you, can sort of give us an update on what happened today.
I know we had the amendment work part of our work sessions. And so under the amendments, we were looking at the pillars that mattered most, which are housing, small business. And so at the end of the day, really understanding that we could take all of the amendments that we have on the table and put them towards a resource which is the most vulnerable right now, and that is housing. And so that conversation was had today. And Councilman Trevino is really an advocate that we have on the council to making sure that we are putting the funds in the right place, even with the ask of the kiosk, the legal kiosk. All of this speaks to the community and wanting those resources that can truly help them have a better way of life.
Councilman, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Councilmember. What I think really we heard today was how we can set some of our priorities as a city, because quite frankly, our budget is a moral document. You know, we have to invest in the things that we believe need assistance, need funding, need to be cultivated. And I was glad to hear my council colleagues, I think all of them really helped to emphasize that housing is our number one issue right now. We're in the middle of a pandemic. And, you know, one of the things that I was very proud of is to have brought several things that can help many people, specifically renters. And we've got to highlight the fact that half of our city rents, but quite frankly, we're not looking at it the way we should, and that our most vulnerable populations are usually fall under the rentership category. And so when we think about what's happening right now, the only thing that's kind of saving us from a catastrophe is that the CDC finally put out a moratorium on evictions. Evictions were staggering before this pandemic. In fact, last Christmas, I gave the entire city council a book called Evicted. And it's an incredible book. If you haven't read it, please read it.
Great book.
And what's even more amazing is that author recently wrote an article about this crisis throughout the country, but he specifically called out San Antonio. And so for me, the crisis that has been highlighted through this pandemic has been housing, and we need to focus on that. We need to provide more dollars for housing. One of the things that I also wanted to highlight today, because it's important to fund some of these initiatives, but the other thing that I'm not in support of, and I was really disappointed when staff changed the recommendations on the housing qualifications so that you can only receive 1 month of assistance, and then you would be asked or directed over to workforce development. I think that's wrong. It's egregious. The current program allows you to get 3 months of assistance and up to $5,000. Why is that important? It's important because we're not at the end of this. We're not even in the middle of this. We're heading into these winter months, and we're going to head into these winter months when the money runs out. So, you know, my calculations, and I did it. We're doing an audit of the risk mitigation fund, which we talked about today. $21.9 million, which we got up from $5 million. That was the original recommendation. I pushed us to get closer to what we did in April, which was 25. At $21.9 million, the expenditure is $500,000 a day. You could do the math. It only gets us to the first week of December. And so what does that mean? It means that we're not even going to have funds available before we even enter winter. What do you think is going to happen then? That is, at the end of the year, the CDC moratorium on evictions will end, and that is going to present a very serious problem. Add to that what we know is happening with our homeless population, which is rising. And so I think housing and homelessness are top issues. We need to stay focused on it. We need to provide funding sources or fund sources that actually help keep people in their homes and provides a housing first strategy. Let's help people.
Thank you for sort of filling us in on what your thought process is. Councilwoman, I want to be cognizant of your time because I know that you can't stay with us the whole time. So I'll ask you this first, and then maybe we can sort of go back and forth. But how have you talk to community members during this time? It seems like you've been very in tune with the community in terms of what they want. And so I'm curious who you've been meeting with, how often you've been meeting with, and how you've sort of approached the community and their advice during this time.
So we've been out to several different demonstrations. We've had several different conversations with a lot of the groups that wanted us to speak to them. So to Miss Celeste Brown, Marlon Davis, Miss Ananda with Fix SAPD. We've met with Farrell Clark. And then just the public comments that come in to the community are from the community to us as a council. And so we've been reading through those comments, and there have been several comments, over 365 comments today. And so just reading through that and then getting an understanding, listening to the comments as they come in. And then we have our community engagement coordinator that's been going out. And so it's been a lot of hands-on work.
That's great. So as the budget stands now, after your discussion today with City Council and staff, what are you thinking? How are you going to approach tomorrow's vote?
With the community's heart in mind, and listening to where do we have an opportunity to really make a better and greater investment. Even when we went into our amendment ask, it was for our youth that are aging out of foster care. It was for our seniors who really don't have any place to have a transitional housing when they're going through this pandemic. One thing that we were receiving calls from our seniors that were being priced out of living arrangements. They just don't have the budget to move. And then within the city, we really don't have a transitional housing pillar for our seniors. And so that was how we went to our amendment ask. And so that is the forefront of everything. We know that housing is part of healthcare. We know that that is definitely something that we have to look at because we have students that are needing to stay in school. We have families that are asking for us to step up and say, help us while we're going through this. But then at the same time, making sure that there is a job for a family to go back to, making sure that a family can find work so that they can continue to be sustainable is what we're also looking at. So it's really about, are we putting our budget where our community really needs it most? And that's what we'll decide on tomorrow.
Great, thank you.
Councilwoman, I do want to ask you, a few weeks ago, you did help pass a bill with council to eliminate chokeholds within the San Antonio Police Department. Tell us a little bit about your process there. Who joined with you on that? Did it come out of a CCR?
Yeah, well, this was an initiative from Councilmember Andrews-Sullivan. I'll let her maybe answer. Absolutely, support that.
Dude, the Councilwoman. So you helped start that. Who did you have join you on that, and how did that process go?
So when we started hearing the calls of the demonstrations, and they were asking for us to step up to do police reform. And so meeting with Celeste Brown, meeting with Marlon Davis, meeting with Farrell Clark, and then taking the initiative to reach out to some of our police officers and having the conversation with the city attorney's office, meeting with Councilwoman Kavea Haverda from the Public Safety Committee, since she is the chair, and looking with Chief McManus at what are our true protocols when it comes to no chokeholds. And even though that there was a ban, there was still that exception. And the conversation is still happening about what does that exception mean when it comes to use of deadly force, and what is the meaning of deadly force. And so we wanted to really not continue to see what we have seen within the case of Mr. George Floyd, with Mr. Eric Garner, with Ms. Sandra Bland. We did not want to have that as a hashtag here in the city of San Antonio. And as we went forward, even our chief of police knew that that was something that we could step up and do as an example to show our community that this is something that we just didn't want to have within the training ranks of our police department.
Oh, that's really good, and we really appreciate that. I know there's pastors in downtown San Antonio who are also concerned with that. Just better way of policing, right? I know these are small steps that we must take, and I appreciate your leadership there of helping to get that one initiative done. I know there's a lot of things that people want to see done, but that was one of them. We do have a question. Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Gavin. I do want to acknowledge Cops Metro and CCSA because they were a part of this process as well. So I do not want to exclude them from the conversation. So I definitely want to say thank you for them taking the time out to meet with us as well.
That's great. And we do have some questions from our listeners right now. And that reminds me, if you are listening to us on YouTube or Facebook, we are glad you joined us. You're probably also most of these people most of us watch it later, not live. But if you are live and you're watching with us now, you can post your question. We have Rafa Diaz Martinez. Says that I'm curious if the council members have insight on how the municipalities, Kirby, Converse, Leon Valley, et cetera, are working on these same issues, and how are we working together for the broader, probably overall metro community? Because obviously these issues go beyond just the city of San Antonio. So what conversations are we having with other municipalities within Bexar County and with the state of Texas?
You want me to answer that?
Sure, please.
So I know that we haven't worked directly with the municipalities that surround the city of San Antonio, but I've been speaking with State Representative Gervin Hawkins, who has also set up a statewide task force with State Representative Lopez to truly make this something that we speak about across Texas as a whole. And so those are the conversations that we're having now. I know State Representative Gervin Hawkins is actually looking to push forth a bill. I believe it's the Justice Bill of 2020 that speaks to police reform across Texas. And she has a task force that she's working with the DA's office, with Sheriff Salazar, and with Chief McManus on at this time.
That's great.
And I would just add that we're also working closely with the county, which it essentially helps us connect to all the surrounding municipalities, as you pointed out. So it's an all hands on deck approach.
Yeah, and Rafa, the commenter, thank you for that. And he also is a ISD trustee position. So thank you for that and all you do. And those same issues exist in the independent school districts as well. So we want to acknowledge that and thank you for that comment and question. Keep those questions coming. Emilie, we'll bring it back to you.
Great. So, Councilwoman, I'm wondering, we talked about chokeholds. Can you talk about the other CCR that you submitted and what sort of came of that?
So the other CCR we entered was the no-knock warrants. We saw that with Ms. Breonna Taylor. We've seen it across the board. We've had it within our own backyard here in the city of San Antonio. Prior to going into this, I know that Chief McManus and the mayor had met, and at that time, we were looking at about 26 no-knock warrants that have been issued here in the city of San Antonio. We still have some cases that are within legal proceedings right now. And so we are looking at all things that can truly speak to not only just the financial reform that we can do, but the systemic racial reform that is built in with these systems of police reform. And so that's what we're speaking to. And the outcome of that CCR is that no-knock warrants have been banned across the board. So for search warrants and for arrest warrants, and also within the SAPD policy, our SAPD officers will not be able to ask for a no-knock warrant or participate in any no-knock warrants, whether they're federal or county side. So that's what's coming out of that CCR.
Well, that's really good work, and we appreciate that. When we had a conversation, we've had Sheriff Salazar on before. We've had members of the young activists as well, a BLM group that collaborates with other BLM activists in San Antonio. And one thing that they did talk about is the upcoming police contract. Now, this is not part of the city budget. That's different in some ways, but there is going to be an upcoming contract with the police department. And that is something that we're also focused on, and how to really create positive change. How do you see this upcoming within the next 12 months, this new idea, this new contract? Councilwoman, how do you would like to see that process go?
For me, it's really having everyone at the table. And so I think that SAPOA needs to hear the community. The community needs to hear SAPOA. We need to hear from our city manager's office, and we as the city council have to take the lead on how we're going to really sit down and have these conversations. I think that now is the time that we can truly make a difference in how we as a city set the example for other cities that are dealing with CBA negotiations. We're not the only one, but at the same time, there are just things that we know that we can make a difference with, and that's how we approach that. We don't close anything off, but we make it transparent so that others can be educated on why and how we do the process, and what steps do we have to take. So I think that is the best thing that we can do, because we know that education is key. But if we're having these conversations behind closed doors, how are we truly being transparent? I think that that's something that we have to walk through when we look at doing the negotiations with SAPOA, with the community's engagement, and then bringing everybody to the table really makes the difference.
Well, I don't do this very often in Pub Theology, but I have thought of an idea, and I'm gonna talk about it with two people I love. Everybody knows about the zoning commission, right? Like you have a zoning commission. I was on Building Standards Board. It's a very similar commission that you appoint people from your district to serve on a commission that gets to vote on something. Now, usually those committees, those vote is not binding. It's just a recommendation to council. Even though they take a vote, zoning might recommend a zoning change 6-3 or 6-4, and then it goes to you guys to vote on. What is keeping us from creating a true commission about this police contract, right? That 10 citizens from 10 different parts of the city can read and look at, right? And take a vote, a non-binding vote. And then that we know when this contract has been now vetted by different people from the community. Usually you set up those commissions to have different types of people on there. You could have retired police officers. You could have various people of color. You could have a holistic group, and then that recommendation goes to council. Is there anything that would keep us from setting up a commission like that has a little bit more teeth than just maybe a think tank or a community like town hall? I'm throwing it out there. If we can have them, if we can have commissions that worry about homes and houses, I'm pretty sure we can have one about lives of people. So is that something that would ever gain traction in the city? I didn't want to put you on the spot, but it's just.
I'll answer that. So the answer is that there's many things that are possible. Let's first just start off with the process in which the contract will be negotiated. What the city manager has asked is that the city manager begin the process as laid out as per the rules of how that negotiation is engaged. And part of that is understanding that there needs to be some negotiation from the get-go. One of those could be that this city council asked the city manager to negotiate something similar to what you described. The idea is, as you pointed out, we want the community to feel like a lot of what's happening is transparent, allows people to kind of understand what is being discussed and negotiated, so that they know fully and deeply what's in the contract. The last contract, the key issue was healthcare. And what was asked earlier about what does defund the police mean? I will help to kind of maybe define that a little further. And that's as people are using that moniker throughout the country, what they're saying is that they want their community to be smart about the limited resources that they have, and those resources need to be applied to meet the needs of people. As you pointed out, Gavin, these are people, right? And the community is just that. Everybody, nobody should be dehumanized. Nobody should be lower than anybody else. And so, at the heart of this is what the city can do with its limited resources. And so, the negotiation the last time was important because the city manager then, Cheryl Scully, rightfully identified that healthcare was going to essentially begin to just blow our budget. It was going to squeeze out everything else that we had available to us. And so that was the huge obstacle and the hurdle throughout this entire entire negotiation. Getting past that was a major milestone. It's important because it allows us to be discussing the budget the way we are today, especially with this economic downturn that we have with depressed revenues. It makes it even more difficult to fund all the city services that people have come to expect. That being said, this is similar to what I had asked for when it comes to the way we respond to homeless strategic outreach. What we know is that SAPD can't simply arrest somebody for being homeless, and we want to help people. We want to know the individual issue that's happening with those people and help them how they want to be helped. And what we've done is we've identified ways to help them with the limited resources we have, which is why, for example, we've augmented the ID recovery program, which your organization, Cornerstone Ministries, has done a great job. And and we know that this was started by 2 bike patrol officers that have done a great job of running the program all these years. What we're saying now is that we're augmenting that through available resources and applying resources in ways that doesn't require a gun or a badge. So these are the kinds of things we need to be thinking about, and that's what I think the negotiation of this next contract is going to be about. It's going to be about how we can define sort of the relationship of police within our community, not one of a warrior mentality, but more of a guardian mentality. And I think that's what the community is asking more for. And quite frankly, they're asking us as city officials to represent them and to highlight the voices that have expressed how much they want the help from our city, and how we can apply those resources to truly meet them where the need is.
Got it. Thank you. I think we're going to have a few more questions for the councilwoman, and then she can stay or need to go if she needs to. I have one more before Emilie jumps back in. We are both part of the Martin Luther King Commission in San Antonio. In the last meeting, they voted to possibly, or I don't know if it's a permanent decision, to cancel the march. This is something that's obviously a big deal. What's your take on that decision? And what can maybe the commission do? And I'm one of them, and to hear the voices of the people and what's the best for our city.
That was one of the things that we went into the meeting knowing that we had met with Dr. Berger and not understanding what COVID was going to look like as we approach flu season and what was going to come next out of that. And so they were taking a proactive step that if we're going into flu season, we don't know where we're going to be with COVID. They wanted to be proactive. So they took a vote as a board to say, maybe we should postpone it. But for me, it's okay, let's plan now for just in case we might be able to have it, but still look at the virtual platform. And so they're still looking at that virtual platform as we're going forward. So we're not going to X out not having a march. It may not be a physical march, but we can definitely do a virtual one. And even in the virtual world, we know that we might even get more people that have not been able to participate to actually be able to participate. So we're not taking anything off the table. We're just being proactive as we go forward.
No, that's really good. We can always plan for virtual stuff. And we learned today how difficult virtual stuff can be, and you want to make sure you get it right. But we can plan for those virtual things. And then if it is around the time, usually marches happen, planning quite quickly. A lot of these marches around the nation aren't planned for an entire year. Sometimes these marches are planned weeks just before when there's an injustice needing to be seen. So I feel like if the time is right, we could possibly pull off the march again. But we should plan for a very creative way to connect our people virtually and then make those decisions later of what we can do in person. So thank you for your leadership there. And I know Dr. Keeley She's been working hard, and I would not want to be in her shoes right now, trying to figure that out. But we're grateful for the people on that committee who do that work. Emilie, you can take us back to the concept of the city. This is what happens when you have a reporter and a pastor co-host. I talk all about the silly stuff, and she has the hard hitting questions. So
Hardly. Well, this is a hard hitting question, so maybe he was completely right. But I want to talk a little bit about the shooting earlier this week involving Daryl Zamalt Sr. Today, the issue of body camera came up. The mayor the Express News asked whether or not the mayor planned to push for body camera footage to be released. And of course, there is an ongoing investigation. There could be criminal charges brought against the officers. It's a very complicated matter. But one thing that he suggested, and he sent a memo to the city manager just recently, was looking at the policies for when body camera footage is released and how often it is released. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that. How often should body camera be released? In what circumstances do you think it's appropriate? I guess Councilwoman, you can go first, and then we'll go from there.
So for me, I think if we have any form of information that we can use to better help our community, we use it. With this being an ongoing investigation, we have to be mindful of that as well. But we have to make sure that we have all of the facts. And we as elected officials need those facts as well. So we're allowing time for those policies to be looked at. And that is something that definitely has to be addressed. First and foremost, we give our condolences to the family that is dealing with this. And just understanding that we all know that this is something that we have seen so many times, and we're just allowing the process to do what it has to do as we go forward, and then look at what we can do as a council to truly make this something that we don't have to continue to have a conversation about.
And I would just add that, and by the way, I want to add my condolences as well. We also, in fact, we have a common friend who was related to this gentleman, and we know it's difficult. It's a very difficult situation, and one has to ask, some questions and try to empathize and place yourself in other people's shoes, and that. Especially when it comes to body camera footage, I know that families often want to know what happened, and part of that is sharing the body camera footage to get a better grasp of what may have occurred. And so these are really great questions. And those that, as the councilwoman said, that we as a council need to try to deliberate and understand that that a family is currently just dismayed, and understanding that something like that, what are the legal ramifications of sharing the video with the family? What are some of the legal boundaries that one can do this? Because I think that is certainly one of those things that I have to identify with or empathize with. If that was my family, if that was my brother, if that was my uncle, that's something that I would want to have access to, and I just can't blame a family who'd want to have access to that.
Absolutely.
Wow. So I've been following this now for probably, like most of us, for the last 5 years. We've just seen such a number of deaths disproportionate in the Black community when it comes to police violence. What are some other things that y'all are thinking about to help reduce this? I mean, obviously, there's things that we can talk about in the talking points that we've seen groups mention. But Councilwoman, is there anything else that you would like to share, or ideas that you have when it comes to this issue of police violence, especially when it comes to communities of color?
I think our police department does a great job of attempting to understand the community. But then at the same time, we need them to truly get out and understand the community. Training has to be done within that community. Understanding the systemic reasons why we as a people do not trust the police. An understanding of how we got here and what the true identity of policing was built on has to be taught. And then how do we speak to the systemics of racism that are built within the judicial system as a whole must be spoken to. And then we have to work for our communities to have the resources to tackle the economic segregation, the issues of poverty, the issues of housing dilapidation, the issues of less economic development, the issues of joblessness and education, that truly have to speak to exactly what we're seeing is a community that is scratching to get what they can get, but then a police department that was never built to truly speak to the identity of those that are continuously being the outcome of the hashtags. And so that's what we have to go forward with.
No, that's really good. I also love to talk to you a little bit about just how we as a community can get better involved. I know that we see the protests on television, we see them live in person, we might have attended them in person. People have various thoughts on that, but how do we engage your offices? How do we really engage and maybe the community when it comes to issues of Black Lives Matter, or when it comes to police brutality or the police contract? What's the best way to stay engaged with the city government? I think a lot of people know that they can come speak at council or citizens to be heard, but right now during social distancing, and we don't know, it's kind of hard to do. What are some ways right now that you would love to see the community get involved in?
Continue to email our office. You know, we're here. We're not just sitting here at home waiting for something to happen. We're actually here doing the work. So they can always email us, and it's council.district2@sanantonio.gov. All of those emails we are able to see, and we're able to make sure they go to the right departments. We're able to make sure our staff has information on what you're looking for and what you're needing for from us for the community. And then, of course, stay in contact with watching us on the Facebook, watching us on TVSA, getting involved and going through our website, www.sanantonio.gov. Those are the best ways right now to really get involved. And so we definitely want to hear from our community. So reach out to us, email us. And if you can't email us, pick up a phone. We're here. You can call downtown and you're going to be able to get someone that can either transfer you to our administrative assistants or transfer you to someone in our local offices, and then reach out to our staff. It's really, if you need our staff, you can put their first name and their last name at thecityofsanantonio.gov. So
Yeah,
my chief of staff is Lou.sanantonio.
Right, Lou Miller. I know Lou well. We were just texting. We were making sure that the stream was all good. Lou's a good guy. He's a Rotarian with me, actually. We're both in their downtown Rotary Club. But there it is, San Antonio. It's on the bottom of this page, sanantonio.gov/council. There you can see the links and phone numbers for both of their offices, and also any district that you might live in San Antonio, including the mayor's office. So sanantonio.gov/council, and you'll see all the links to get involved. And there's also boards and committees that people can get involved in. If you're interested in any of these things, contact your council person and they can connect you with the open boards that you can apply for. Those are always ways to get involved. Emilie, we got some more questions for us.
Of course. And Councilwoman, I have to say, you just gave away my one trick. That's how I get a hold of city council members and all the city staff. It's just the first name and the last name. Can't believe you gave it away. As we approach the budget vote tomorrow, I'm curious if you can give us a sneak peek on how you plan to vote.
For my community.
It's a good answer. Councilman?
Again, I do still have some heartburn over the way staff has proposed restructuring some of the way they do the emergency assistance. So we'll see what they bring tomorrow. If not, I'll have to make a motion that basically says, look, let's keep doing what we're doing. Let me tell you a little bit about the program. The program was established many years ago, and it was only a couple $100,000. When we started seeing issues, one not too long ago happened in my district with Soapworks, because the ownership changed hands, and a lot of people were feeling that they were going to be displaced. We upped the risk mitigation fund to $1 million to help people move, to help them in a very insecure time, and in some cases maybe help them sort of bridge the gap that they were going to need for a little while. But during this pandemic, what it has shown is how important that really is. And so I'll keep fighting for the housing assistance that I know many people need. And let me just say that part of that is that they're doing exactly what we're asking them to do, right? We're telling them, please stay home, please social distance, please practice safe standards that we are asking our entire city to follow. But it's also affecting the ability for certain people to work full-time hours. In many cases, the small businesses that are impacted then have to reduce those hours because there just isn't enough business. There isn't the regular amount of business that was once there before the pandemic. And so those folks are having to live through that, through reduced pay, which means that they're going to have trouble paying the rent. And so as long as this city is asking them to do the right thing and to stay home and socially distance, we need to step up and provide emergency housing assistance. There's no question about it. And I won't stand for any modification of the program that is really just meant to extend the dollars, and ultimately was just going to leave a lot of people out. I think it was a boneheaded recommendation, and I just won't allow. So that's one example of what we'll have to see tomorrow. If things are where we hope that they are, and it's as my councilman says, is if we think that these are things that are going to be helping the community, then hopefully we see a very quick adoption of the budget. But I can tell you that it's a complex vote tomorrow. There's a lot of things going on, and that's one of those that's very important and near and dear to my heart. And I want to make sure that we're doing it right. And I don't want to change while we're adopting the funding. I don't want to change the mechanism in which it's awarded. That is not what we need to be doing right now. There's other points we want to make regarding some of the potential amendments that we're seeing. We asked for example, it seems like a small amount in a $1 billion budget, but $30,000 can go to birth certificates that homeless need to begin their ID recovery. The issue for us is, or for the city should see that homeless, the first barrier is simply getting an ID. And that was one of the recommended amendments is to get $30,000 allocated over to the city clerk's office so that she can pay for at least, or I should say, up to 1,000 birth certificates, so we can get people going, fast track, get them their IDs. The IDs, and I don't have to. I mean, I'm speaking in front of Gavin here, who really just has taught me so much from the very beginning since I got here on council. In fact, we spent the night at Haven for Hope in the courtyard to learn more. We walked around, and one of the things he's always expressed to me is removing these barriers as quickly as possible. And to think, for $30,000, we can help up to 1,000 homeless get their birth certificates and begin that ID recovery. So those are the kinds of things I'm going to keep my eye on tomorrow. We've asked for, it's a long list, but these are all things that help the most vulnerable people in our city.
Well, thanks. I obviously am going to be supporting any type of form of ID recovery. But I want to bring to the general point. This just brings back to the conversations we've had at Pub. Pub Theology, we have all different people come on, clergy to leaders to educators, and we have all different views, different brews and different views. I'm drinking San Antonio lager right now, so because I had two San Antonian council people on, I needed to drink San Antonio lager. But there you go, original Coca-Cola.
Hey, Jimmy Cola.
Hey, whatever.
I have a Taco Cabana margarita.
Okay, there you go.
All San Antonio.
There you go.
Have water.
That's good.
Oh no.
Most of the council people, when they come to Pub, they're very kind. Now, so one thing that we've been told over and over again is this, and we've talked about a little bit tonight, is defund police. But a lot of people, when they say that, means like reallocate some money. So police budgets, fire budgets take such a high percentage of the overall budget of our city. And there's so many good reasons why, but I think a lot of people are concerned about the amount. And if we were able to adjust that amount, I think right now, the last time I saw was a 5% increase, more or less, that's been presented in this budget. I think if we were able to adjust that down some, not that we're trying to totally defund the police. That's not everybody's trying to do, but if we're trying to just give money to different places, so therefore the police department would have less pressure when it comes to ID recovery or dealing with the homeless. So actually by reallocating some money to the police department or from the police department to other agencies, like you mentioned with ID recovery or education or community policing and other ways of peacemaking, then therefore we might have that money. So therefore $30,000 wouldn't be necessarily a bigger deal. Are there any strides? And this is a question I know I had somebody text me because they wanted to ask this question. And please keep your questions coming. If you have any questions about this, we have a few more minutes with two great leaders in San Antonio and a reporter, and they all know a lot of this more than I do. But are there real strides to make a significant reduction? When I say significant, I mean a sizable look at reducing the police budget. So therefore, we would have more money for community resources. I'll let the councilwoman speak and then go to Roberto.
Honestly, I think that there's more that we could do. I really do. I think that there's other areas within that budget that we just have not tackled. And so when you have community members who are saying that there's $23 million of the non-CBA side that we could truly use to put back into the community, but we as a elected officials or as a city staff looking through this budget have not spoken to that, then we know that there's still some more work to do. And I think that is why the conversation is continuously going.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I have to agree. There needs to be more work done. I, for one, was one that committed to finding ways to best utilize our resources. And I gave a couple of examples. One of the things that's in this budget that I'm so proud of, and again, this is something that you and I, Gavin, have talked about. And in many ways, again, I want to say, go back almost 6 years that you inspired, was to develop an outreach strategic program. Every district, because of our work this July, is going to get their own outreach specialists. So what does that mean? It means that you're going to have a dedicated person attached to every council office. Along with that, we're going to have interns that basically dovetail or work alongside a lot of these outreach specialists to go deal with a lot of the issues we're seeing all over the city with regards to homeless. The program since July has really been able to connect over 34 people to some services for some long-term assistance, long-term help. That's what we want. What we don't want is to simply move people into another neighborhood. So one neighborhood might say, that get them out of here, and then you use the police to sort of push them out into another neighborhood. And in my case, the council member, I think it would not be very. It's not effective to simply say, well, let's get them out of my district and put them into, Councilmember Andrews-Sullivan district. That doesn't solve the problem. The problem is a human problem, and understanding that we can actually fund something that is effective, is compassionate, and helps people the way they want to be helped. And I think this is the right thing at the right time. And add to that, as you pointed out, is expanding the ID recovery program. We have an amazing city clerk, and Councilmember Andrews-Sullivan helped lead the interview process that basically solidified Tina Flores as our city clerk. She's an amazing person, has an amazing story, and is somebody that is always offering creative solutions on ways to help this community. And one of those was when I knew her when she ran the passport office, or the passport division of the city clerk. Many people don't know we even offer this ability to get passports in our city. So when in working with the outreach specialists, and I knew that the ID recovery program only happens one day out of the week, and for that matter, really one morning out of the week, that was a very difficult thing with SAPD and with volunteers of Corazon Ministries. My first question to Tina was, hey, Tina, you've done passports. Do you think you could help with this ID recovery program? And boy, she was a wealth of information. She talked about House Bill 123, which currently helps pay for birth certificates for youth. But we can expand that. And I've been talking with Diego Bernal to ask him to sponsor a bill that would help us get birth certificates paid for anyone who's homeless. And so, those are some examples of how we can get something done. And lastly, the city clerk even offered this idea of getting people an actual passport card. Mm-hmm. It is the highest form of ID. But what's really amazing, and where she connected the dots, was once you have a passport card, you're in the system. And what's really wonderful about that is that for 10 years, let's say you lose your card again, you can recover it a lot easier than having to start over with a birth certificate. And so this is so important, especially because we know a lot of our homeless here in San Antonio may have family in Mexico, and this would be a great way for them to get to family where they can get some help and support. But ultimately, I mean, these are the creative ways that I think we need to continue to think about when it comes to how we allocate our very limited resources. We need to continue this, and I think that even after tomorrow's vote. The community should know something very simple. This council has the right to bring anything up for discussion and for a vote. And I fully anticipate that there may be a CCR or two or other discussions or agenda items that can be brought up, and the community needs to keep pushing.
So this is a question for both of you. You've laid out a number of initiatives and a number of different things that you want to focus on, both in this budget and in the year to come. If there was one thing that you want to see changed by this time next year, what would it be?
For me, it would definitely be tackling the issue of housing and housing security, food and food security. I think they go hand in hand as we address our public health crisis. And so I would really love us to see every San Antonian have a possibility of having a home, having a roof over their heads. I would really like to see us handle that.
And for me, I think what I can say is that that what I hope to see change is our commitment to housing, how much we fund it. This year, the Under One Roof program that I created many years ago, which is basically to repair roofs to essentially save homes and lower the utility bills. It has been extremely successful. This week, we will have completed 1,000 roofs in the city, and I'm super proud of that. But we went from $5.25 million last year to I think it's $2.25 million this year. And it's disappointing. Obviously, I think we could do a lot better than that, and it's a problem. I should say it's a challenge that has an actual finish line, and this is something that we can actually do to help save the existing housing stock, which I've said for the longest time that the existing housing is the most affordable housing that we have because we already have it and we need to protect it. It actually helps maintain the character of our beloved neighborhoods. It helps to keep people, families in their homes, and it keeps people from the next awful and traumatic event, which is becoming homeless. So to me, I want to connect the dots on housing. I think housing is a broad subject that connects to homelessness. I'd like to see us adopt a housing first strategy, fund some beds, fund some opportunities for those who who are wanting to accept a roof over their head to have that place. Right now, we don't do that. If quite frankly, we create bottlenecks for those who need a detox, those who simply, for example, maybe they want to smoke a cigarette, and they'll, one of the things they tell me is like, why am I going to go somewhere that restricts me from smoking a cigarette? I can smoke out here all day long. And I think we should be thinking about ways that we can accommodate people where they're at. This is a big problem. And then lastly, we've been pushing this for a long time, but we need to have a renters commission in San Antonio. It needs to be a renters only commission. I'm disappointed to learn that there's several of my colleagues who would like to see a combination of renters and landlords on this commission. The idea of a renters commission is to provide a voice where there lacks representation, and renters, as I pointed out, are some of our most vulnerable in our community, and they really would serve in a great advisory role to help us as council members understand some of these issues. In fact, the irony for me has been that as hard as I've been pushing on a renters commission, which is over a year now, in fact, I introduced this last June, and to see that a pandemic would only highlight that we had those on city staff, city management say a lot of the things that we've been discussing, like right to counsel, how we disperse the risk mitigation funds, the issues that we're seeing exacerbated because of this pandemic, all those could have been helped by having a renters commission. Imagine that. We've been saying this since last June. We weren't in a pandemic last June, but what we were. What a lot of people would say is that we were in a crisis. We're in a housing crisis. We're in an eviction crisis. We're in a homeless crisis. I want to see those things change.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. And that we can hear your passion. That's what we love about Pup Theology. People can be as passionate as they want here. We're not, well, we have a reporter here with us tonight, but normally we're at the spot, and you can even yell at Pup Theology if you want. So we do want to shout out to the Friendly Spot. They're our normal hosts. They're in downtown San Antonio. They're back open, so go enjoy a place outside safely with masks. Get a drink, get some good food, hang out some good.
Great place. Yeah, absolutely.
We'll be back there soon. We're trying to figure out a way to get back there and do it live and safely, but one step at a time. Before we kick it back to Emilie, we do have a question from a guest, and I do want to go back and close out after Emilie's question about some faith things. Both of you all know are people of faith, and we're at Theology, and we can talk about that. So, but we do have a question from Karen Weidman, who does great work in our community with the homeless, actually, with her and her husband. She says this: Is there anything being done to improve schools in the economically depressed districts? And bridge the digital divide when children and high schoolers don't have enough access to virtual learning now? Good question, Karen. We'll start with the Councilwoman.
Thank you so much, Karen, for that question, because that is one of the largest things that we saw going into this pandemic was how many kids were not connected to the virtual reality for them to even go to class. Working with the San Antonio Independent School District and speaking to our district trustee, Ms. Alicia Perry, we were able to find out how many students were not counted, how many students were missing. How can we go about finding those students if they have been evicted? And then working with the CARES Act and working with our technology department to really close that digital divide. And thanking AT&T, they have stepped up to want to be a big asset going forward. And we're using those funds to truly help our students become digitally connected to their classrooms, to their teachers, but most definitely to those counselors and those advisors that they need to have connections with. And then also during this process of the budgeting, Councilwoman Vera Grant asked for Chromebooks. And so what can we do as a city to form a collaboration with maybe Dell or with Apple or some other entity that can help us get those digital devices that are needed? And then making sure that we have the hotspots and getting those hotspots for the kids. And then working with VIA, and VIA is using their buses for some of the areas that do not have connectivity for their digital devices. But then also making sure that we have our digital hubs within the city of San Antonio set up and ready to go to where anyone can go to those areas and actually get onto a hotspot or a digital connectivity device. And so those are the things that we're doing right now. And we're really taking strides to understand that we're now going to be in this virtual reality world for a while. And we have to have a way to make sure that the broadband and that the servers don't get full and overrun and too full to where our students are not able to have that access. But we must start with working with our kids one-on-one, working with their families and finding out exactly what their needs are. And if this is something they can or cannot afford, and then how do we move forward? So those are the things that are being worked on, Karen. But thank you again for your question.
That's good. And real fast, before we take to Roberto, I will get to you, Roberto. That's one thing. That is one thing. Connectivity. I was on a commission right when COVID started. I was on a commission for both of you, actually. Various forms of like COVID committees, kind of like, what were the names of those?
The COVID-19 working groups.
Working groups, that's right. And when I was on work group for you and also for Roberto. And one of the things we did for the one for Roberto is the immigration subcommittee that I ran with Professor Gill from Lady Lake University. She's a wonderful person. She really made it happen. She gets all the credit. And one of the recommendations for migrants, but also really about homelessness too, which is what we were talking about in the Councilwoman's office, is connectivity to internet. And then really pushing for one day, like citywide connectivity where all people can have access. So I think these are steps to get that to that direction. And thank you for listening to those reports and hearing from us. Roberto.
Well, let me just add to all of that, and I think yes to all that, but we also have to realize that the biggest challenge that our school districts that are depressed or school districts in our depressed areas have is funding. And so what's happened is there's just simply a lack of or they don't have as much funding to build the necessary facilities, the resources that other areas that have more dollars can provide. And so one of the things that I think we can all do is be supportive of SAISD's work to potentially get a new bond going that has proven to be very helpful. These are some of these facilities need a lot of help and work, and so that's what these bonds are so important for. And I know it's a very difficult time to be talking about that because, quite frankly, again, we were all talking about we're in the middle of a pandemic. It's difficult to even say that, but what our school districts need is more revenue, more funding. And then, of course, on top of that is how can we support them as a city? I'll tell you something that I'm so proud of that we were able to accomplish here in the last week is that that I've long been trying to solve the issue of sidewalks for our city, specifically in our depressed areas, which is really the inner city. Why is that? Well, because in the inner city, we have existing sidewalks that are broken, not just missing, but there's existing sidewalks that are broken, and the city has left those alone and said, we don't repair sidewalks. Yeah. And so that's become a problem because a lot of districts like mine and Jada's, we have older infrastructure, and of course it's going to be broken. It's been there for, 50, 60, 70 years in some cases. And to expect the sidewalk to last that long, I mean, not always, right? So what I was able to decode was I learned that the reason that we cannot fund the repair of sidewalks at a level that I was hoping to fund them, we actually have bond. Much like I explained for the school districts, we have our own bond, and we had an $850 million bond. Those bond dollars cannot be used to repair sidewalks until today. And the reason is that the way that our finance department had been looking at this was that they were looking at the word prepare or maintenance. And this is the problem, that the issue is that we've misinterpreted what this is. To get to use these certificates, the bond dollars to build sidewalks is key. And so what I was able to explain was that you're not actually repairing the broken pieces. You have to demolish that piece, section it off, and you're reconstructing that piece of concrete. I worked with the city attorney's office as well. We were able to get the right language. And we're now, by simply changing the program from the sidewalk repair program to the sidewalk reconstruction program, we have access to millions of dollars. In my district, it's $4 million. So pay attention, guys, because we're fixing your sidewalk. We're fixing it all over. And what's really exciting about this is that it's never been done before. The inner city especially has miles. And when I say miles, I'm not talking about 5 miles. I'm not talking about 10 miles. I'm talking about hundreds and hundreds of miles of broken sidewalks. But we're going to be able to fix it, and we're going to be able to do it in quick fashion because we now have access to this. That is an important piece to how kids get to school. Think about that. That's how the city supports school districts.
No, that's good, because that's, there's parts of the city where you actually have to walk on the street if you're trying to follow the path of the sidewalk, right? So you're like, well, I can't go there, so I have to walk on the street, right? And you see kids on bikes, you see kids just walking or pushing strollers of their sisters or brothers, and you're thinking this is not a good thing. So thank you for that. We're going to kick it back to Emilie before we conclude with some just casual conversation.
So I guess one last question for you guys about the budget and sort of your thinking overall about criminal justice reform. I'm curious how you think this should be approached. I think one really interesting thing that has come in the last 3 months since the death of George Floyd is that we're sort of seeing differing views about how police accountability and police misconduct should be handled? Do we handle it incrementally? Do we do small changes over time? Or do we do broad sweeping reforms? You know, I think there's been a push away from police community relations committees and just talking, but how do we actually get work done, and how do we address these issues? Do you think that it needs to be these small steps? Do we need to be very methodical, or do you think it can be done in a big sweeping manner?
We have to do it the same way that it was brought to us. We have to do it in a systemic change. We have to take it step by step. We know that we can't do things overnight, but we know that we can do things that will definitely speak as we go forward. So there will be small steps, there will be major steps, and then there will be true steps that speak to systemic reform as a whole. So I think it is a strategic operation, a strategic planning, and it's definitely a mission that will be continuously going. And as we continue to push forward, we'll look at different and new ways. And one thing that we know for sure is that change is going to be continuous. It's the only thing that is continuous in this lifestyle and this lifetime. And so we're just going to continue to work on changes as we have the time and the opportunity to do so.
I think to answer that bluntly, we've got to have a very we got to be willing to have very, very difficult conversations about the realities of what we're talking about. We need to get to some potential examples, and I listed a few examples of what we can do to allocate funds in a way that is actually working towards solving the issue, but also helping to maybe mend some fences as well. And so, it's what I know is that it's certainly not going to be easy, and it's going to take a lot of very tough stances and tough conversations. It may require a combination of all the things that you described. I mean, we have to keep this top of mind. We have to make this part of our DNA in terms of, if we're going to be discussing what we do as a city, then it's kind of has to be part of our guiding principles in everything that we do. As we're thinking about everything that we do, we say, does this benefit the community in a way that they expect the city to be there for them in a way that is compassionate, that is providing the level of service that we all would hope to receive, whether it's for ourselves, our friends, our mothers, or just anybody in the community. That's the goal. And we'll continue to keep this on the forefront. Everything we talk about, everything we do needs to have this in mind, because there's opportunities. There's opportunities to improve. There's opportunities to make a better city. And I think that's what people are asking us to do.
That's good. Continue, Emily.
Oh, no, I was just going to say thank you for that input. I'm not sure. I mean, I can ask questions all night, Gavin, so you don't want to hand me the reins.
I do want to say thank you to Councilwoman Jada Andrews-Sullivan for joining us. I know that we started late, so she had to go, but I'm grateful for her, and I'm sad that we can't say properly goodbye, but she had to take off, and we're grateful for that. And remember, share this video. If you're watching right now, hit that share button. That's how we get this out there. So share that to your pages, Councilman. You can share that to your page. We'll get it to Jada as well. Emily, are there any thoughts that you have? We'll ask you. We'll ask you a question. Roberto and I can ask you a question. Any questions that you have? Anything you would like to talk about?
Oh, goodness. No, I'm very interested to see what will happen tomorrow with the budget. I think that this has been a big conversation for 2, 3, 4 months now, and it will be interesting to see how our city council members vote, but also to see how our community reacts. One thing that has been really interesting to me in the last 4 months, and Councilman, I don't know if you share this sentiment, but in some ways, it seems like San Antonio isn't a huge activist city. There are portions of it that are. I mean, obviously we have the big MLK March. We have a lot of really active community members, but I've been here for 4 years now, and I've never seen this level of engagement as we're seeing in these past 4 months. And so I'm really interested to see what the community thinks about this vote and about these larger issues. And yeah, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I think they've already expressed a level of disappointment, rightly so. We because I think you heard both myself and Councilmember Andrews-Sullivan say, we can do more, we can, and so all we can say is that we'll keep pushing. That's one aspect, and to your point about the level of activism, I think it's truly amazing that it's happening in our city, because it's something that I think is good for our community in the sense that it helps to fortify our identity as a community, and these kinds of things are critical in the way we see ourselves, because we see ourselves, or at least I think that we should see ourselves in the way we want others, not from the city, for those that visit, see us. And I think that we impact a lot of what goes on in the state of Texas, in the entire United States. And so I'm happy to see the rise in that. I'm happy to see more and more of that. People have not only the right to do that, but the responsibility. I was reminded today of a quote that we have a responsibility to stand up when we feel that we are being held back by unjust laws. This is what this is about, and it's just about expressing our voice and finding a way to use that as an opportunity to come together and find solutions that benefit everybody. I think that's what San Antonio is all about. When we say we're a compassionate city, we also have to be a city that's willing to listen to one another. That's at the heart of this. We have a long history that many people are proud of, and some people also share a lot of pain from that history. And so we all have to acknowledge that having a long history like we have can sort of provide that setting for many in our community. And for one, I think that's why I call San Antonio home. That's why I love the city. These things, as I see them, are opportunities to bring people together to fortify the kinds of things that I think help me personally, just as an individual, grow and self-actualize. So the most amazing thing for me since I've been on this council is just, I feel like I've gotten to learn so much more about San Antonio than I ever would have. And it's truly an amazing city.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I really want to thank both of you. I still want to go back to this one question, because some of my friends downtown, they're just really when they saw that 5% increase to the San Antonio Police Department, they just broke their heart. They've been marching for weeks. They've been talking to the mayor. The mayor has come out and said, I stand with you. This is not going to happen. You're one of the very few council members to actually maybe utter the word defund police, or to say Black Lives Matter in that kind of form. What's the main hang up to keep us from really seeing that reduction. I mean, I was even shocked that wasn't even a break-even type of funding. Like an increase in this time was almost just a slap in the face, some people would say, to those protesters. What can we do? What can we do to in the years to come to really make a significant difference?
It's a great point, and I have to be honest that I don't know that I have a definitive answer other than to say that we have to work together to find very specific examples of ways that we can actually utilize those resources that truly provide the benefit we're all asking, right? That's kind of what happened with the ID recovery program as an example. That's what happened with the outreach specialist that I created. The way that all occurred was that I made the case. In fact, a lot of it just came about exactly the way we wrote it out. It's a lot of work, but it's worth it. And we made the case that there's a way to provide more service to address the concerns that people are bringing up, and to be responsible with very limited resources that we have. That's what we got to keep doing. I mean, and so the short of it is also knowing that we as a council we meet three Thursdays to vote on things a month, right? Every month we're voting on. So it's only one Thursday out of the month that we don't vote on something. So keep pressing. Let's work together to find other great examples that can help provide that level of service that we're all looking for. And quite frankly, we could also let's think about public safety that is broader, right? That includes our Department of Human Services. That includes, as I've shown, the city clerk's office. What does public safety mean to us? And as we define it, we can help, I think, shape a lot of what the budget could look like, and how those resources can be utilized to be effective, and to be the kind of thing that, again, as I was saying, as a community, as people protest to say that they want something to be just, and so therefore, let's work towards a budget that people feel is just, and because at the heart of this is that we can all agree that justice is the most important thing to the health and the public safety of any community is justice.
That's great. And before we conclude, I do want to bring it back to this idea of, like, San Antonio is a city of also for hundreds of years, and you could say that a lot of people have various faiths. There's the Catholic faith, there's the Protestant faith, and Travis Park Church is celebrating 175 years next year. So 2021, Travis Park Church will be 175 years old. It's the oldest Protestant church in San Antonio, along with First Presbyterian Church. We started together, actually. We shared a place 175 years ago, and I guess when Protestants didn't have many buildings, so they shared a place. So it was a Presbyterian service and a Methodist service, and then they found their own their churches. But during this time, I know that you've had your faith journey. Where do you find this inspiration? How do you keep going when there's so many challenges, Roberto, that are just every day just draining, and you just can't even believe you're almost dealing with them? Not only in this pandemic, but we see this economic fallout. Just not only before that, San Antonio is still one of the highest ranked cities when it comes to generational poverty. These things that we're tackling, that if you just get in the weeds, you almost can get depressed. You can almost lose faith, not only maybe in a lot of things, but in other people, in our communities, and just the systems of government. I've spoken to the Councilwoman about this, not only in our meetings with the MLK Commission, but I just know how she relies on her faith and relies on the community of faith around her to support her. One thing that she did, and I want to compliment her on, right when she became in office, there was a proposal to put a youth detention center, a youth. There's another word for it, but at the time it was like this company, this private company that can take youth that are going through the asylum process, and they get placed in these kind of encampments that are sometimes run by nonprofits, but some of them are run by for-profit companies. And this was a for-profit company wanting to rent space from a church that is nonprofit, to put in one of these centers. And a lot of people were alarmed by this. And I mean, it was one of her first months in office, I think. She stepped up to the plate, got the people of faith together, got clergy to really stand up, to stop the passage of this, in not only in zoning, but in the city. But actually the faith leaders went to the city, I think the city of Converse, and they had to fight the same thing there. And that was all rallied by her and the faith community in District 2. And I appreciate that. So where do you, Roberto, find inspiration when you're just down and out?
Truth of the matter is, I've had my issues my whole life. My whole life. I've questioned religion. I've questioned faith. And I think that I could sum it up in a quick story. Not too long ago, my aunt passed away, and this particular aunt was like a second mother to me. We're basically in the same household growing up, because I was raised by a single mom, but I was so lucky because in that household was my grandmother, my aunt, my mom, me and my brother, sometimes my uncle, who would go back and forth from Houston down to McAllen. And she was a social worker, by the way, and for elderly. And she was just amazing. I mean, I think, I've never known anybody that would exemplify point is, I was a little jerk of a kid, and I would say to her, "Oh, that's all BS." She would teach CCD, and I said, "Oh, whatever. I mean, this is ridiculous." And she said, No. Let me explain to you. You should pray more. You should ask God. And right away, I was real sarcastic. Well, I'm praying for $1 million. And she said, that's not how you pray. And that's not the kind of thing that God cares about. God cares about very simple things. And he wants you to see the world in a very simple way, because it's that way that you can start to see other people like yourself. And she said to me, "Look, next time you want to ask God for something, ask him for something he can give you." I said, "What's that?" "On a hot day, ask God for a cool breeze." I thought she was crazy. Like, God, okay, whatever, Thea. But I was out with my football team, and it was a hot day. I mean, in pads, and there was no wind. And I sarcastically, I remember, because I was kind of being sarcastic, because the coach said, "Geez, it's really hot," and it was approaching 100 degrees. And I said, "Well, you know what? I know something." And I said, "My aunt said that if we all pray for a breeze, we might just get it." And the funny thing is, I was trying to be a joker, but the team was like, "You know what? Let's do this." And we prayed, and then this breeze came in. It was unbelievable.
Well, thanks for that, Councilman. That's a personal story, and I've heard you say personal stories too that get emotional when it comes to the work on the border in your life and seeing people down at the border in South Texas. I actually read this. One of the oldest things that we do at Corazon Ministries, which is the part of Travis Park Church, it's the homeless ministry that is now working outside for the past almost 6 months. We've been teaming up with the city of San Antonio to provide meals at the homeless hub in downtown. But one of the oldest things that we do, it was this thing called the prayer circle, where we collect prayers throughout the week in various forms. Churches collect prayer requests, and usually those prayer requests are said by pastors or maybe a team of prayer people inside the congregation. But what we do at Corazon is they take those prayer requests, right? And the homeless pray for the prayers of the church, which is kind of what you think. It's like an inverted thing. You would think that we'd be praying for the homeless. And the oldest thing we do, it's been happening over 20 years. Phil Watkins, a great lawyer in town. Beth Watkins is his daughter, and she's on the 5th Court in San Antonio. He's been leading that group. And they've been saying those prayers, and we read this to them because we've started meeting again because we've allowed groups to go back to our church. If there are small groups like AA or recovery circles, those are really important to meet. So we've gone back into small groups of like 5 people, and we social distance. And one of these things has been getting some of the active people in that homeless ministry that used to want to pray. They would meet James Brown to Andy Schnarzi, these guys that do this. And we read this. It says, prayer is less about getting God to do something that we want to do. I think a lot of people think that like, oh, this is what I need. It's a shopping list, right? We got to take this shopping list to God, or we got to take this shopping list to the council, or we got to take this shopping list to something, right? But really, what prayer is all about is doing something that God wants us to do, right? That's what really prayer is. It's an act of love. It's to remember when we say these prayers at church, whether you say them in high church and you read them and you chant them, or you remind them. There's various ways that people pray, and you usually might pray for something specific. You might pray for the protesters. You might pray for the people who are homeless. You might pray for people in poverty. You might pray for your aunt who's in the hospital. But what those prayers really are supposed to remind us to do, it's not a magic spell. It's to get you to go visit your aunt in the hospital, or go and to remember to volunteer, or go to actively live out your faith in your community, right? And I think that's when we can regain hope with each other, right? A lot of times in this socially divided world where politics split us, everything can divide us, even in our own agreements of groups of people. You'll get divided just because we want to get divided now. It just seems like that's the only way to be heard, is if you have something to divide over. When we go out and we actually seek prayer differently as a source of love within the community, it's not a magic spell. It's not about a dogma. It's about actively becoming part of the better good. That's what prayer and I think our faith is all about. So thank you for sharing that story with us. And it's always been a delight to get to know and work with you. I think that was, in the spring of 2014, right when you became on council. You're up against some stiff competition, sir, but I think they picked a better person. That was in 2014, and you did that right at the start. I got to know you, and really have been an active and creative, just really, really fun ways to stay involved in creative solutions for the homeless. Whether that's the homeless showers, and you and I have battled through that politically and found ways like. We ran into walls that we never could think we could run into.
And guess what? So number one, I want to publicly thank you for being a partner in joining in that, because my understanding is we've just received the shower trailer. So we've got it now. And now I also want to thank HEB because they're going to pay for the wrap that goes around the trailer. And we're going to put some graphics on there that has some useful information so people can understand where they can get help and what this is all about. So it's just a matter of getting the wrap on there, and then we're gonna deploy it. So you help fight alongside me for that, and I thank you for it.
That was an interesting that got me so deep into the political world. I was like, oh no, I don't want to do that ever again. But hey, I don't envy the work that you have to do. So thank you, Roberto. Emily's going to stay on. We're going to keep talking, but I want to respect your time. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing your heart, and have a great rest of the evening.
Thank you both. I really appreciate this.
All right.
Thank you.
See you.
Bye.
Emily. Wow, another round of Pub Theology. You know, we started out rough. We had to figure out some technical issues, which we always have to do. Don't worry about it. When I interviewed Adriana Rocha Garcia a few weeks ago, we surprised her with her priest that she likes to have. We surprised her with Manny Pelaez, who came on and asked her some fun questions. And we couldn't do that like that today because we had two people on. But I ended up deleting the video accidentally on my phone. Like my Facebook app was open and I deleted the video and I had to re-upload it after everybody shared it. And but we got it back up. We shared it. It's viewable on Facebook within minutes, but don't worry about it. It's been a fun thing. So I want to ask you a question now.
Oh, okay.
Right. So you've been covering this entire time. And I'm going to ask you the question that I know that the council has a lot of things to say, and there's probably things they don't want to say. But what is the holdup? What's keeping this budget with so many people saying we want to reallocate police money, whether that's defund the police or reallocate or change it up or whatever things they say? And there's a lot of people say that. Is it because there's another part of the community saying not to, or is it pressures from unions? What's really not getting into the city government? And I'm not just saying that's elected officials. That could be our city staff, our city managers, just the whole thing, right? What's keeping us? What do you think as an observer of this?
Well, one thing the city has said is that they have to increase the police budget by this wasn't a total amount, but that there was a $13 million increase in healthcare costs that was required by the collective bargaining agreement and also by the state legislature. And so they're saying they have to pay $13 million or invest $13 million. And so they tried to sort of stem the budget a little bit. They tried to pull back some police budget funding, but that in the end, it sort of broke even. And so that's why you're seeing the budget that has been proposed. I think that's a big part of it. I think, we haven't seen a lot of talk with the union, but they're certainly very powerful, and that could be playing a factor in things. It's really hard to say. And I think it's also sort of this differing approach. The city manager has said that he really wants to take a systematic, step-by-step approach to looking at these issues and how we look at criminal justice reform. He's proposed sort of a year-long process where, starting into next year, they could be looking at more policies and other ways to address criminal justice reform. And so I think, you have all these different ways of looking at things, and people want change now, and that's just not how city government is necessarily set up. And so it has been a slow process, and we'll see what happens tomorrow if that sort of satisfies what a lot of people are looking for, or if they want more than that.
No, I mean, I understand that. I mean, also these budgets are worked on, months and months and months before. And so this budget was already set in place for the most part, even before this pandemic, or even kind of right when this pandemic started. They had to reshift some money around, and they quickly, had to do some things for COVID. But for the most part, the rest of the line items are kind of settled by the time it gets to this round of negotiation with city council. So I think it might be the fight is 2022, or the budget is, that'd be right, the 2022 budget that will be discussed all next year. Are there any other ways that you see that are roadblocks? Like, we've talked now with the sheriff, we've talked to city council, we've talked to people in the BLM movement here on Pub Theology, but are there any other roadblocks that you see just, keeping this change from happening? Is it just because we live in this bubble? Like, maybe our world is more bubble than the general San Antonio population? Like, what do you think the overall take is?
That's really hard to say. Part of me wonders if maybe I think it is a really divided issue. I mean, every time I write a story about criminal justice reform, or I write a story about a police arrest that's controversial, I still get a lot of emails and a lot of comments from people who say, well, they should have just followed what police said.
Mhm.
And certainly there's an argument there, and perhaps that is an important takeaway from some of these conversations. But at the end of the day, um, I think it's important that we have conversations and we bring up both sides. And so um, I think it is a really divided issue, and it's really hard to come to a middle ground right now,
Yeah.
when things are so far right and so far left, not necessarily just politically, but just in terms of what people are thinking, how they want to approach these issues, and so it's sort of hard to come to a middle ground.
Yeah, that's true. I see the comments, on various forms of media. You see the comments on local news versus, the San Antonio Express News, or when I say local news, I mean like TV local news, or
Mhm.
like NPR or the San Antonio Report, or all those things. And you can see kind of where their listeners or readers are, and you can still see that we're a very greatly divided city when it comes to police reform, because it's just kind of our nation is divided like that right now. And so middle ground seems weak, and therefore both sides don't want any type of middle ground. So when the city council or the city staff is trying to manage that, it looks like they're moving slowly when they're trying to figure out how to maneuver these two populations in their areas or in their governance. Because I just know that some of the people I know and work with are just extremely frustrated when they saw that 5% uptick, and just couldn't comprehend that was happening. But we have to remind people that's not the only thing that really matters when it comes to police reform. We got into it last time, so I encourage you to watch our interview with Sheriff Salazar, and we talked about some of the things like trying to create reform either statewide or countywide, where if a police officer does something and is kicked out of let's say the San Antonio Police Department or the sheriff's office, that they can no longer then apply to another organization nearby. That there's still punitive repercussions to a act of brutality or breaking some type of code there. So therefore, let's just say now that the chokehold ban is for sure in San Antonio, if an officer does that and they're removed from the police department, they just can't go out and a few days later apply for the Alamo Heights Police Department or somewhere else in the state of Texas. It would have to be a binding thing. So there's so many other things that we have to look for when it comes to police reform. And I really encourage people who are upset on both sides, right? Or maybe saying the city is not doing enough, to find those areas of where you think you can make the best impact, because some of this stuff does move slowly. So if you can find that best area of impact and focus on that. I keep trying to mention this commission. I don't know if it goes anywhere. I've now told it to the three council people, that's my idea, but it can only go so far. I can say it all I want unless it becomes a reality. Anything that you're working on now that you're cranking out in the Express News, what are you working on right now other than the city budget that will obviously be consuming your day tomorrow? Are you going to be at the council? Are you going to be online at the council meeting? Is that your beat tomorrow?
Not exactly. So I do have to give huge credit to Express News reporter Josh Fector, who has been covering the budget day in and day out. I'm sort of a little bit in the background, following things from the police side of things. My main focus is criminal justice reporting. And so I have been interested to see specifically how the police budget is going to work out. So I will be watching what happens tomorrow, but it's going to be all Josh. Josh has this covered, and of course other reporters from the San Antonio Report and KSAT and Ken's and all that. My focus right now, I've been writing a lot about the officer-involved shooting earlier this week. It feels like a month. It's been a long week. And so I will be continuing to follow up on that. In fact, while we were talking, the police released a little more information. So I think I'm going to go back and look at that report and see what they're saying. Earlier this week, on Sunday, I wrote a story about the city-county magistration process, which is a long-standing debate in San Antonio, where the people who are arrested by the San Antonio Police Department, as it is now, as the process currently works, are magistrated by a judge at a city facility, and then several hours later they're transferred to a county facility and they are magistrated again. So it's like the same process all over again, and that's because there's a lot of politics at play and a lot of city processes that can't quite and county processes that can't quite put it all together, but it turns into a rather maze-like and difficult system to navigate for defendants. And so I wrote a story about this earlier this week in the case of Matthias Omitu, the black jogger who was stopped by police, sort of bringing that into to highlight how it works.
No, that's good. Now, so you can always follow her on the Express News website, get a subscription. If you don't have one, you can get it online for really, really good prices. You can get it on Sundays. You can get it delivered to you on your iPad or your iPhone, or hey, if you still want to do the old school way, they'll still throw it in your yard, right? And so follow Emilie Eaton and all the good reporters at the Express News. Thank you so much, Emilie, for another round of Pub Theology. And thank you for our listeners. Share this. I know we're kind of toward the end, so people are probably like, I'm done. But we'll be back next week. We're going to be with Pastor Chad and Pastor Rob. They're both pastors at the Arsenal Church, which is where we're actually recording right now. They're great pastors that do a lot of good stuff on social media. So we're going to be going around San Antonio, actually eating at a few places around town. So we're going to go mobile somehow next Pub Theology. So we'll go kick it back with some pastors and some clergy again. So enough with the politics, right? We've done some politics. So
I want that job. Like,
hey,
take me off criminal justice reporting. I want that.
Hey, that's what we have to do. So some of our listeners are like, we're done with the politics. Get back to theology. We'll be back at the theology. And if you want to watch any of our videos, remember, you can go back and watch them, at least since we've gone online since COVID. You can go to the video section of our Facebook page, Pub Theology San Antonio. So that's Pub Theology SA/videos. And you can see all those past interviews with sometimes rabbis and pastors and politicians and sheriffs and educators from all over San Antonio. A few weeks ago, we had a great discussion with Simran Jing Singh, who is a religious professor from Trinity, and now he's at NYU, but he is a Sikh theologian, and talked about his children's book. And we had Mayor Ron on, and it was a fun discussion with a great Sikh theologian. So everything's different here at Pub Theology each and every week. We try to stay connected with our community and the faith that we know how to live. So thank you, Emilie, so much, and we'll see you around. You stay with us, and we're going to end this program.